Hello friends, welcome back to Cosmopolitan Cornbread. So before I get into today's video, Fort Smith, Arkansas is the city where I do my shopping. So it's kind of sort of close. I mean, it's a drive to get there, but there is an airport there, and there is also apparently an Air Force base, I guess, and they have fighter jets, and they've got some sort of training or something going on, and there has been a bomber, which interestingly my husband, Mr. Smith, was like, I've never seen one of those here in the States before. A particular kind of fighter jet that he saw. He's like, it's a nuclear capable da-da-da-da-da, whatever it was. So anyways, if you hear fighter jets buzzing overhead, they are like flying all over western Arkansas today, it seems. And then one other thing, I have a giveaway happening on the YouTube channel. There is a collection of some coffee mugs, some of the pottery mugs that I had made in the past that were my personal like backup mugs. And I had several people who were wanting to enter the giveaway who had sent me emails, Facebook messages, Instagram messages, and I just wanted to clarify that the only way to enter the giveaway is you have to be logged into YouTube, which is basically a Gmail, Google account, and you have to leave a message on the YouTube video. That is the only way to enter. I cannot take those messages and convert them into entries. The way I select a winner is I have this tool that I use that randomly picks a comment from specific videos, and that's how it does it. So if you don't have a comment under that video, there is no entry for you. So that's the only way to enter. So I just wanted to clarify that because, like I said, I had a lot of messages of people who were wanting me to enter them into the giveaway, but they hadn't left a comment under the YouTube video, and that's the only way to do it. All right, so let's talk about this. You know, I love homesteading. I love it. I would not trade it for anything. It has its challenges, and sometimes things can happen, but I mean, this is the life I've dreamed of. And the only way I would ever stop homesteading and like move to the suburbs or something like that would be if the Lord explicitly directed me to do so. And I know He's capable of doing that because, you know, we thought we were going to live forever in Alabama, and here we are in the mountains of Arkansas now. And here comes one of those jets. I hear it. But that said, being out in nature, whether it's a flat level farm in Alabama or the mountainous woods here in Arkansas, this is my happy place, and I wouldn't trade it for anything, despite its ups and downs, despite the work that is involved and everything else. But that said, all right, I keep pausing for these fighter jets, waiting for them to finish doing what they're doing and move on someplace else, but they just keep coming back around. So I'm just going to have to talk over them, and you'll just have to ignore them in the background because they're kind of driving me crazy at the moment. So those of you who are new here won't know the stories, but those of you who've been around for a little bit may recall how the first year that we were on our homestead in Alabama, I was in the middle of building, well, not the middle of, I was on the tail end of building the original chicken coop that we had there when I had a tick bite and didn't think anything of it. You know, I don't freak out when I get a tick bite. It's just part of life. However, this tick bite, my body didn't react to it normally. I thought it was very unusual. It gave me a strange wound, which I treated with raw honey. And then a couple days later, I was sick. I was really, really sick. And turned out I had contracted Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Took me a good while to get over, but I did, for the most part, recovered. Then a couple years after that, we had a tropical storm that came through. I can't remember the name of it anymore, but and the farmyard where like the chickens would congregate and things like that was just absolutely a swampy mess. And we had ducks at the time, and I would go out there every day and I would clean out the pools, clean out all the water containers, you know, feed the animals and all that stuff. And I would talk to them while I was doing all this. Like I always do, actually, I still do. However, in this particular instance, you know, we had the nasty mud everywhere, and it was foul, y'all. This was foul, nasty mud. And I was spraying out one of the water pans, and the jet caught the edge of one of the pans, and it sprayed this nasty, filthy, muddy, mucky water up into my face. And of course, my mouth was open because I was talking to the ducks and greeting them and all that while I was doing my chores. Well, I knew at that time, at that moment, I'm like, oh, this is not good, because that water was so bad. So I immediately like started spitting all over the ground, all this stuff, trying to clear my mouth out, you know, all that mess. Well, apparently it wasn't good enough, because a few days later I started getting sick. And that time around I contracted something called Giardia. I was absolutely miserable. You know, Giardia is one of those things you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. You hear stories every so often of like kids going off to camp and swimming in a pond and contracting Giardia. I tell you, I could not imagine a child going through what I went through with that. That was, up to that point, that was the sickest I had ever been in my life. And I won't go into the gory details of all of that, but imagine having to run to the bathroom 160 something times in a 24-hour period. And I'm not exaggerating, it literally was that, because I was keeping tally to try and determine whether my symptoms were improving or getting worse. And it was 24 hours. It was just 24 hours of running to the bathroom. It was awful. I ended up in the ER. It was terrible. But yet, I was not about to want to give up homesteading. So that brings me to this situation here. So the first thing I want to mention about this, I want to stress the importance of having proper shoe wear on when you are a homesteader, not wearing inappropriate shoes. Because now, first of all, I live in boots and Birkenstocks. That is what I mean, I live in those shoes. If I don't have boots on, I've got Birkenstocks on. If I don't have Birkenstocks on, I've got boots on. It's usually one or the other. I have other shoes. I never wear them. Well, I've been walking the dogs a lot lately because, you know, first it was the puppy and then Duke being afraid of the fence. And so I just started walking the dogs a lot. Well, now we're walking all 4 dogs, and, you know, I don't mind. It's great exercise. I enjoy the fresh air, the sunshine, and all of that. Well, when I'm going out the door, I have this bad habit of just slipping my boots on and not putting socks on. Well, I ended up giving myself really ugly blisters on both feet, on my toes. So I'm like, well, this isn't good. I need to let this heal. So I need to stop wearing my boots for a little while because it was rubbing. So I pulled out some of my super comfy Skechers, I think, slip-on tennis shoes. Super soft, would let my blisters heal, and then I would go back to wearing my boots. And just to show you or demonstrate the fact of how rare it is for me to wear something that isn't Birkenstocks or boots. Friday evening, we were out here walking. It was my son, my daughter-in-law, and the grandbaby, Willow. Mr. Smith was in Colorado. He was in Colorado all last week and into the weekend. Well, we were out walking, and my son, Jack, looked at me, and he goes, "You look really weird." And I turned around and I looked at him, and I started to ask him what he was talking about, and I realized he was staring at my feet. And he goes, I didn't think you even owned shoes like that. And I'm like, I know. I don't normally wear shoes like this. I have shoes like this. I just don't usually wear them because I like boots and Birkenstocks. The following morning, I got up and was doing chores. Mr. Smith, again, was still in Colorado. And I had on the tennis shoes, and I have kind of a routine for chores. I feed the chickens, I feed the buck goats, then I feed the other goats, and then I come down here and I feed Sophie and Amos, the mini mule and mini donkey. And I had fed the chickens, and I walked over to feed the bucks, and I almost rolled my ankle. And I thought to myself, these are not appropriate shoes for homesteading, and I should not be wearing these shoes out here doing chores. And made the mental note to not wear them for chores again. Great for taking the dogs for walks and all that stuff, not great for chores. But I didn't come in the house to change. I just was going to finish up the chores, and that was going to be that. Well, I went and I fed the other goats, and then I came down here, walked across the little stone footbridge, and went and turned off the electric fence for Sophie and Amos. Stepped over the fence, no big deal. Have done it a gazillion times. Sophie and Amos walked over to greet me like they usually do in the morning because they're excited to see me. However, that's when things went wrong. I took a step towards Sophie and Amos, and my foot caught a little piece of wood, an old stump that was sticking out of the ground, which caused me to basically trip. I did not have stable shoes on, and when I did, I lurched forward. Now, when I was a kid, I learned all sorts of safety rules about equines, horses, donkeys, mules, etc. And two of those rules are the rear end is the danger zone, and never startle them. No sudden movements. Don't do things to startle equine. Suddenly and without warning, lurching towards the animals because you tripped definitely qualifies as a sudden movement and startling. And a mule or donkey's instinctive response to something that scares them like that is what? To kick. And that's why the rear end is the danger zone. And of course, things like this happen so quickly. It's almost like slow motion. You almost have like 10 thoughts at the same time while it's happening. And so I tripped, started to fall. I saw Sophie spin around and move away. I saw Amos spin around to bolt, but because he's scared and he's a mule and he's Amos, he kicked. And these two animals, they might be minis, but they are strong. They're very strong. And when I tripped and was going forward, my head came down and he kicked, and it was a direct shot in my head. And I grabbed my head, and it all happened so quickly. I know I hit the ground. I'm not sure exactly how I hit the ground. I know a lot of parts of my body really, really hurt and are bruised. But I grabbed my head, I jumped up, and I stepped outside of the fence just to kind of get away from them and get my bearings. And I was holding my head, and I cried out, God Almighty. And then I said, please don't let this be bad. And right in between those two, I had the thought, people die from this. And I sat there for just a moment, just kind of, recovering from the shock of what had just happened. And my head hurt so bad. And I thought, oh, I hope he didn't scalp me. And I let go you know, I took my hand down, and when I did, blood just went everywhere. I mean, head wounds bleed a lot. I mean, it doesn't matter how big or little. Head wounds bleed a lot. And blood just started pouring everywhere. So I put my hand back on my head and I started applying pressure. And you know, sometimes when things happen, you have thoughts that to others may not seem logical, but to you it seems very logical at the time. And when I put my hand back on my head and started applying pressure, I took a deep breath and I thought, well, I've still got to feed the animals. So I just kept my left hand on my head, applying pressure to my wound, walked over to the horse trailer where we keep some of the hay, grabbed them a flake, put it in their feed rack, came out and remembered, oh wait, the goats needed hay too. So I went back into the trailer, got another flake of hay, came out, set the hay down, because I'm doing this all one-handed. Set the hay down, put the, turn the fence back on, pick the hay back up, and then came back out and started walking over towards the goats. And I paused. We have this big stone bench that sits right here where the waterfall is when we've got running water in the creek. And I thought, I really need to look at this wound. I need to see what's going on here. Because I was concerned. He's a mule. I got kicked in the head. And I know that people die from this. And this could be really, really bad. And so I pulled my phone out of my pocket and I took a picture. And, you know, I briefly looked at the photo and I was like, okay, that looks bad, but I think that's just hair piled up on my head, and I think it's fine. It's just a head wound. So I put my phone back in my pocket, picked the hay up, put my left hand back on the wound, applying pressure again. I walked up the hill, gave the goats their hay, and started walking up towards the house. And as I did, my son, daughter-in-law, and grandbaby came outside. And of course, that's when there was looks of horror. My daughter-in-law was like, I was trying to figure out what exactly I was looking at. And, you know, I saw them looking at me and I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. I'll be fine, I think. I'm good. I'm good. I'm one of those people who just hate others to worry. You know, I don't want people worrying. I don't want people fussing over me. I don't like to bother people. I'm like, I just need to get it cleaned up. I need to get it cleaned up because after all, I was kicked in the head by a mule and their feet are not going to be sanitary, of course. And this is a really nasty head wound. And so I needed to get it cleaned up. So I went into the bathroom and I was looking at it and I'm like, oh, this is really nasty. And I debated, do I go to the hospital or do I not? Do I go to the hospital or do I not? And I know, I probably should have gone to the hospital because it was a kick to the head. But I'm also one of those people who hates going to the doctor. I hate going to the hospital. And I never go unless I absolutely know that I need to. Not maybe I should, but I need to know that I need to go. That's when I'll go. And I was like, well, let me just get this cleaned up. Let me clean it. And so I just stuck my head in the tub. It ran cold water over my head and just flushed it and flushed it and flushed it. And then I took peroxide and I flushed the wound with peroxide. And then I looked at it again. I'm like, okay, it's still bleeding, but I think it'll be okay. My skull, you know, it didn't feel like my skull was messed up or anything like that. You know, my head, the shape of my head looked the same. And so I just pulled out the bandages and wrapped my head up. And now my head, the way my head is shaped, you never see me wear, well, I can't say never because I have worn one once or twice. I don't normally wear stocking caps in the winter because the elastic in them, they just like go whoop on my head. They never stay put. That's why in the winter time, when you see me outside, if I've got a hat on, it's usually a Mad Bomber cap because there's no elastic. They just sit on your head. Well, I have a sensitivity to adhesive. So most bandages cause my skin to blister. It's very, very painful. So I don't use them. I can usually handle some Band-Aids on my fingers, but that's about it. So I use the bandage stuff that kind of sticks to itself. But again, things that are elastic don't like to sit still on my head, and I really needed to do this kind of snug for the pressure to get the bleeding to stop. And so I'm sitting here, I had the bandage on, had the wrap on. I'm like, how do I get this to hold still? And I glanced over at my bedroom wall and I'm like, oh, my old hat. So I threw this on and the weight of it kind of holds the bandage in place and makes it not go anywhere. So I've been wearing this hat for several days now. So at that point, I started looking up all of the information about concussions because I was already pretty certain I had at least a mild concussion. Aches and pains, all that stuff from hitting the ground or whatever else I hit. Like I said, it happened so fast, I don't really remember all of those details, how I landed or anything like that. You know, getting the kick to the head kind of rung my bell. But, you know, my pupils were fine. I didn't lose consciousness. I wasn't vomiting. You know, there's like all of these different symptoms for concussions. And for the most part, all I was really dealing with was fatigue, headache, quite the headache, and just, you know, the general pain. So I wasn't too terribly worried. I just kept it clean, changed out the bandage, you know, on a regular basis and all of that. That evening, Mr. Smith got home from Colorado and he was really quiet, very, very quiet. Honestly, I think he was concerned and worried about me. And I hated that he was worried about me, but you know, husbands don't like when something happens to their wives, especially when they're not there, you know, because it's worrisome. So I got up the next morning and I took the photo that I had taken of my head when I was making sure I hadn't been scalped, and I put it on my computer, and that's the image that you see in the thumbnail for this video that I have blurred out. And don't worry, I am not going to show you that image. I'm not going to show it to you, because when I pulled the image up to put it onto my computer so that I could blur it out for this video, I looked at it very closely, closer than I had when the injury happened. And when I saw the photo, I was like, that is really bad. And at that point, I started second guessing myself and thinking, I wonder if I should go to the hospital, because this looks really bad. And as I was thinking that, my friend called me. Now I had sent her the actual photo of what had happened. And I jokingly at the time said, well, let's mark off getting kicked in the head by a mule from the bingo card. And her husband were up at the Ozark Homestead Festival Expo up there in Missouri, and they were very distraught. She said if we had been in Arkansas, we'd have come and gotten you and taken you to the hospital. And so, like I said, I had just looked at this photo when, and was contemplating going to the hospital when she called. And by the way, this is the friend that I actually got Amos from. And I told her, I'm like, I don't know, I'm thinking maybe I need to go to get it checked out. And you know, she was upset, and she's like, don't you worry about anything. If you need to go, you go. And I'm like, well, let me take a shower. Let me get, you know, thoroughly cleaned up and really get a good look at this. And so that's what I did, because, you know, that morning when I got up, it was a matted mess. It was hideous. And so that's what I did. I went ahead, I took a shower, cleaned it up, got a good look, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't need stitches because this injury, there's like nothing to stitch. It's gonna take a while to heal. I'll probably have a scar. I'd be surprised if I don't have a scar. But, you know, once I got it cleaned up, I was kind of relieved that it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And so that's just kind of where we're at now. I'm just caring for it myself. You know, like I said, I did clean it thoroughly. I also immediately started taking antibiotics. I have an herbal antibiotic mixture that I keep on hand at all times in case of emergencies. I've taken it before. I have family members who've taken it before. It's great stuff, totally natural, and I'm actually going to start looking at making it myself, because the #1 ingredient is black walnut leaves, which we just so happen to have growing here. So I have been taking all the measures to prevent infection and all of that. I also have colloidal silver spray, which I've been using to treat the wound. That stuff works amazingly well. And then beyond that, I have been taking some painkillers because I've got a significant headache. I've also not been sleeping great, which is a side effect, symptom of concussions, and of course exhaustion, and my whole body hurts, some spots more than others. Again, slammed into the ground, not exactly sure, got a little fuzzy there for that moment. So I did reach out to a relative of mine who has been a nurse for as long as I can remember, and worked specifically in trauma, and, you know, got some information from her, got some advice, what to look out for, things like that. So I don't want any of you guys worrying. I don't want you to think that I did not take this injury seriously. I did. And if I did actually think I needed to go to the hospital, I would have. I also know that the spot on my head where I got kicked was probably the best spot to have gotten kicked, because a couple inches one way or the other, and I probably would not be here making a video today. And I'm very, very much aware of that. It is what it is, and I'll be fine. It'll take my body time to heal and recover, but eventually I'll be all right. I am going to be taking it easy. I will have to hold off a little bit on the kitchen renovation that was going to start this week. I'm going to wait a little bit for that now. And I had some other things that I was going to be doing this week, which I'm going to have to kind of shelve for a little bit and wait until I have my physical capabilities back for doing all the things. Yeah, that's what happened. And I do want to mention too, real quickly, I am not upset with Amos. You know, when I spoke with my friend, she and her husband called immediately to check in and like, what happened, what's going on, you know, are you going to the hospital, et cetera, et cetera. You know, they were worried about me, and I was worried that they would think I was upset with Amos for kicking me. It's funny how our mind thinks when we're going through things, you know. But I am not upset with Amos. He, you know, he is a stinker. He is a mule. but nothing of what happened was malicious. He's not an aggressive animal. He's not normally dangerous in any way. And I scared him. And it is instinct for a mule or any equine, when something scares them, they kick. That's their defense. And so I do not hold that against him at all. As a matter of fact, that evening I went out there giving them treats. I was, you know, patting him and scrubbing his back and scratching his ears and all that, because I didn't want him to be nervous about me. And so, you know, as soon as I was able to, I went out there and spent some time with the two of them, just to kind of let them know everything was okay. Everything's fine. I'm not mad at you. It's all right. We're all good. Aren't we, Nubsy? Say, we're all good. We'll be fine. So, yeah, I know. He almost killed me. And it could have gone sideways very, very quickly. But as the saying goes, all's well that ends well. And I just thank the Father that it wasn't worse, and it'll be fine. And so that is it for today. Thanks for hanging out with me. And I will be doing a short video on Friday. It'll just be the announcement of the winners for the mug giveaway. And I'll get back to regular videos after that. So that's it, you guys. I am done talking for today. Have a great rest of your week.